Well, we've got Stephen Downing back on the show. You were with us yesterday and told us all about the history of drug war and gangs that you observed firsthand with the LAPD. Now, today, let's talk about LEAP, an organization that you have taken a very major leadership role in. You want to tell us how you got involved with LEAP and what you're doing with them? Oh, and I want you to talk about the LEAP cop car. I love that cop car.
Yes, well, I retired from the Los Angeles Police Department and went on and did other things over the years. And about 7 years ago, 6 years ago, I saw a article in Los Angeles Times that was about the drug war. I forget exactly what it said, but based on my experience, I disagreed with what was said in the article, and I wrote a letter to the editor. And that letter was published in Los Angeles Times and apparently seen by the founders of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, who at the time were back in Massachusetts. So they called me and we chatted, and they recruited me to be a speaker, because that's the main function of LEAP, is to educate the public, providing an education from those who are from the criminal justice system, who have experienced firsthand the war on drugs. So I agreed to do that, and I became a speaker for them, and spoke in many venues across California, and eventually became a member of the board of directors of LEAP about 2 years ago. So we are an organization of about 100,000 criminal justice professionals, including prison wardens, police officers, prosecutors, former DEA agents, former CIA agents, judges, plus our supporters.
Wow, 100,000, that's a lot.
Well, that's 100,000 including supporters. I would say that about 10 to 15% of the 100,000 are criminal justice professionals, and there's about 500 of us in the United States who are active as speakers for the organization. Others are members and supporters.
Now, that's another thing. You're in other countries. Can you want to talk about that for just a minute?
LEAP has a presence in, I believe it's something like 120 countries throughout the world. We have a board in Brazil. We have a LEAP board in Canada, LEAP Brazil, LEAP Canada, and we have one in Europe now, LEAP Europe, and there is one in Australia. So it's a global problem. Prohibition of drugs is a global problem, and it's good to see that we have compadres in other countries that are working very hard. As a matter of fact, it's a very interesting phenomenon. In Brazil, it is not difficult at all for LEAP Brazil to recruit active duty police officers.
Active duty.
Active duty.
How does that work?
The culture is such that I guess they're not marginalized and condemned. Here, if they can, they fire them if they even speak. I was at a conference, a law enforcement conference here about 3 months ago, and I went to a session put on by the chief constable from Vancouver, British Columbia, and he was discussing actually their social media means of dealing with criminal riots, which was a very good presentation. But in the setup to his presentation, he spoke of kind of in negative terms of the needle program that they have in Vancouver, British Columbia. And he kind of said, can you believe that people buy their heroin on the street and go to this place and shoot up, you know. And so afterwards, I approached him and I talked to him about one of our board members who is an active duty police officer in Victoria. And I asked this chief constable from Vancouver, I said, do you know the name? And he said, yes, I do. And his chief doesn't like him very much. And I said, you know, you really should get acquainted with this guy because he's brilliant. He's a consummate professional as a police officer. He just sees the harm on drugs. I said, for example, that needle location in Vancouver that you were speaking of, isn't it true that in that region where that facility exists, that there's been a reduction in crime? Isn't it true that in just the last few years, AIDS brought about by needles, bad needles, has been reduced by over 50%? Isn't it true that more addicts going through that clinic are saved from overdoses because the professionals are there? And isn't it true that more addicts voluntarily enter treatment having been exposed to the education of the professionals in that clinic? And he just kind of stared at me. Well, you know, at those conferences, how you go up and talk to a speaker afterwards and there's a line of people behind you. When I finished speaking to him, I turned around to go, and there's this cop behind me in plain clothes. They're at a conference. And he reaches out and grabs my ID that that's hanging from the neck. And he says, "Who the hell are you? How'd you get in here?" And that just gives you an example that if anybody in the police culture expresses any kind of curiosity about the harms of any enforcement program, the harms of the war on drugs, they're immediately viewed as an outcast. So that's why it's so difficult for even the good ones who are there, who believe, because their brass are so married to that money and so married to the politics of the drug war and the industrial complex of the drug war, that the environment of the organization is such that if you raise the question, you're going to be marginalized. And a lot of people are in very good positions that are advancing law enforcement in many, many, many ways that just avoid it and won't speak out about it because they want to be effective in their fields.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I still want to know what it's like to drive the cop car, the Leap cop car. Do people do a double take, or what's it like when you're driving that in the street?
Well, as you know, we got a black Lincoln SUV, and it got a big light bar, and we put all the Leap logos, which makes it kind of look like a police car, but it says Law Enforcement Against Prohibition.
Because your logo is a badge.
Our logo is a badge,
yeah.
And it spreads across the door. It looks just like a police car, but when you get close, you see Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. On the back windows, you say, "Stop the war on drugs." On the fenders, you say, "Save our children," very much like the cars at the end of Prohibition.
Now, wait, what caught my eye was that the back of the cop car says, "End the violence."
It says both. It says, "End the violence" and "Save our children."
It pulls you in because you see "End the Violence" and it's a police car, and you think, oh, great, what do they suggest for ending the violence?
Yeah.
And then it says "End the war on drugs," and you really do a double take.
Right.
But it's true.
It is. And we drove that car across the United States summer before last. We met a group of victims of the war on drugs in Mexico. And we led them across the United States, 2 busloads full, 110 people. We led them across the United States, 27 cities in 30 days. And when we're going down the highways, I'm telling you, we got the high signs from people. They loved it. They agreed with us, and I couldn't believe it because I'm here to tell you that 90% of the cars that went by were giving us the high sign, and the strangest looks we got were from police. And we got pulled over a few times, especially in Chicago. Well, I don't agree with you guys. One sergeant pulled up. He says, "Is that a real police car?" I said, "Of course it's not, and it's clear that it's not." "Well, I just want you to know, I don't agree with you." I said, "Sir, you have a constitutional right to do that." He said, "Yeah, well, I'm telling you." He says, "Have you ever wrestled with a PCP suspect?" I said, "You know what? I did wrestle with a PCP suspect about 40 years ago, but I haven't heard of one lately. I haven't heard of one in 2 decades." And they're myth makers. They buy into the myths of the war on drugs. Harry Anslinger started with what was it? Demon. What was his movies and all that?
Reefer Madness.
Reefer Madness and that silliness. You look at those today and you say, my God, did people really buy into that? Did they? Well, that started it. That started the education of America. Well, today it's the same thing, only it's more sophisticated. The DEA and NIDA put out phony statistics or skewed studies and things like that, and they want to keep the American public believing that the drug user and the drug seller are evil people.